So, Phil and Anne, it was a pretty crazy task. This thing of talking about yourself, and you might wonder. There's a lot of architects here. How many architects are here? Just raise hand. Okay, so you know how good it is to talk about your own work, right? But I didn't understand that this was about me, not my work, and that's not really nice, because then you have to dig deep and find out who you really are and why you do what you do. And that's really difficult. And when I found out a week ago that that's what this was about, I basically haven't been sleeping. I've been so super nervous. So really bear with me, because we are going far back, and it's been a wonderful journey. I mean, this is a fantastic... I know Kent was saying this is strange, or I don't know what you said, but this is wonderful, because really far back where you started, some things is anchored in what you do today, and you might think that it was something else, and now I spent a week, and I'm super surprised. I learned something new about myself, so it doesn't matter what you think. This was pretty good. So let's get started. So why do I do what I do? That's a good question. My mother and father, they were bank trained, actually. And my father was also a stockbroker, but they stopped this. They didn't want to work with money. So they started buying up houses. They owned a boathouse where people were living. They were cooking for them. They were taking care of people. And they were very entrepreneurial. And at this time, just after, like 10 years after, 15 years after the Second World War, things start to happen. People are moving outside of the city, not into the city. Like every time we talk about it, urbanization, that's what it's about. This was about moving out. So they bought up houses, put in water and toilets, sold off the land, and sold the houses. That was their thing. And it was a very nomadic life we had in the first years that I was living, and when they started working. Then there was this house, my summer house, or our summer house. It was called Formosa. It's basically on an island called Amager, and for you guys that are not from Denmark, we call it the shit island, because it's made of waste. But this was where poor people had their kind of summer houses, and today it's of course changed. It's very rich to live there. But here my mother and my grandmother is working in the garden in front of what we called the castle. And there was a reason for that. It was because it was made out of scrap wood and scrap windows, actually from the castle in Copenhagen, Amalienborg and Fredensborg, where my granddad was working as a painter. So he was harvesting materials and was building this. And for us, this was like extremely valuable. We owned it for 50, 60 years, I think. And this picture, which is really interesting, I didn't know it existed until I was grown up, and someone sent it to me from Los Angeles. It was in LA Magazine many years ago, but it was talking about the Danish working class and our welfare model. That in the welfare model, you had areas where you would go and you could produce things. This garden was just only producing things for us, greens, and everything that we talk about would be nice to do today. This was our access to greens, potatoes, and so on. But it was also our access to having a good time, summer vacation. This was vacation, but it was super, super settled and easy. And a very, very beautiful house, in my opinion. They were both my mom and dad, the first to get an education. It was a bank education, so not a long academic education. And they both grew up during the World War II, which had given them an incredible approach to be limited in consumption. And we never used more than we needed, seriously. We used not more than we needed, and way less. It was so extreme. We didn't travel. We didn't spend any money on new cars, bicycles, anything new. Everything was used. And of course I should have thought about that, but this was new to me. When we went on vacation, we borrowed a house for 2 weeks from a guy called Kai, who my dad played tennis with. That was kind of our traveling agency. Growing up, I felt like there was always a limit to resources. And here, this is me as a kind of business guy, and here the farm guy in me. I loved playing in the garden, but I never had the newest. I didn't have roller skates. I didn't have BMX bikes that was a hot thing, or a Donkey Kong video game. I was kind of never the guy who had these things. And it created kind of a sense of longing. I wanted to have that so much that I found all kinds of way of getting it. Finding something that was broken that I could start fixing so it looked like that BMX bike or something like that. And for my parents, when I look back, it wasn't deprivation in any way. It was a very conscious choice of having enough. They felt they had enough, and I think that was the philosophy of enough is enough. And the crazy thing is that my parents were doing really well. They were making quite a lot of money on doing this, but they stopped working at 45. And they said, we have enough. And I said, we have enough? Look at that old car, Dad, and I mean, look at my clothing. I mean, it's not new. And he said, we have enough for our life. You have to take care of yourself. But for us, we think we have enough. So they stopped working. They sold everything. They kept the old house that my dad and my granddad built together, and that was it. They stopped working because enough was enough. So in these years, my dad was repairing everything, like our 35-year-old Bang & Olufsen TV. Imagine how old are your screens at home? 35 weeks. And he was fixing everything, washing machines, radiators, the roof, everything could be fixed. If something was broken, it would be fixed. And it was my biggest frustration. But this was the environment that I learned about how you did things. Because since I was really small, I was building with him. I was on the roof. I was doing these machines, understanding electronics, understanding that things has value and you can repair it. And understanding this, you need to know and understand the technology. You need to know how to take things apart. You need to know tools, and you need to know how things actually work. It's a craftsmanship, and the love for craftsmanship that goes into every architect, because we love to do things and build them. So I was allowed to do basically everything. I could paint, I could take things apart. I was the farm boy in the middle of Copenhagen, allowed to do everything. There was no limits, only one. I wasn't allowed to buy anything new. And that restraint is so important, because when you have restraints, you start to be creative and you start finding solutions, which is so important in what we do. So, a different look. For me, sports has been very important. And I think often as architects, you forget a little bit that you're, especially after school, where you are your own client, your own municipality, your own architect, no limits. But in reality, you're a really small part of the puzzle. And you want to be everything. But in reality, you are. And when I played handball, I learned that you're part of a team. This respectfulness of being a part of a team, that you have to deliver, you have to suffer, you have to be respectful, and you have to give something more back every day so people trust you. And that's what architects are actually really good at. Think about competition teams. That's not how it is in other businesses. So I really brought that with me, and this picture up here is where we are winning the Danish championship in handball. And these guys, this guy, the keeper, and this guy, they turned professional in Barcelona, some of the best handball players in Denmark ever seen. And of course, because of that, I weren't playing that much, but I was there. Another important thing, and I often think about time and my life in pictures where things happened. And I have a lot of them, and you probably also have that. And this, a little bit strange picture, is on my way home from school, in architecture school, Kystvejen in Aarhus, towards Rigskov. It doesn't mean a lot to many people, but for me, this was first day after architecture school. I've been there 8 hours. And I went home like this. Yes, this is what I want to do. And that feeling, I still have it. The fact that you feel like you found your purpose, what you want to do, and you can do it every day, 24 hours, until you faint, and you still love it. That is purpose. And when you find that, you have to hang on to that, and I tell that to my kids as well. It doesn't matter what they choose. If they can find that thing in there, keep pushing it, and I'll be behind it. So I love studying, and drawings, building models, mock-ups, the whole process was fantastic. And I felt like it was a mental opening, because architecture is for many other people something everyone has an opinion about. But all of a sudden you understand it's a syntax, it's a language. It's something that we have together, and we have to accept that some people think they have it as well. But there's a reason why we talk in plan sections and facades. There's a reason why we draw in that way, that we have a language with each other that communicates space in a certain way. And that certain way is something that in architecture opens for you. And it's fantastic. And you can keep going, keep working. And at the architecture school in Aarhus, where I was studying, I had the pleasure of having Chris Thorburn, Svein Tønsager, Stephen Willesey, and Tine Nørgaard as my tutors, which were wonderful. Of course, they were teaching drawings. Sorry. Of course, they were teaching modernism. That was my kids' drawings. At school. So Le Corbusier, Tadao Ando, Kengo Kuma, Miralles, and so on. All modernistic approach to architecture. Their visions, they reshaped how I saw the world, and I couldn't get enough. And there was so much to learn. But I always wondered how much volume there was. The bigger, the better. We are taught that the bigger we could build, the more we could build, the better we were. The larger the project, a huge museum, then you made it, then you can die. You're home safe. And it was an odd way of understanding modernism and this way of working with this concept. And that's how we were trained. And I was so encouraged by the architecture that I saw on the West Coast in Los Angeles, because I felt like something else was at play. It wasn't the same modernism or rationalism that was going on in Europe. It was a different type of architecture. And I met this guy, Michael Rotondo. And it was a very transformative moment in my career when I started working in his office. He's the founder of Sarch, you might know, also founder of Morphosis. Fewer people know that, together with Tom Main. And he's a Buddhist as well as an Italian of origin. So he's a very spiritual architect. And it's very different, because what does it mean to be a spiritual architect? And the way he worked with exposed materials is something that was a little bit odd, because we have cold bridges everywhere here in Denmark. And we need to get things around everything. It can't just go through a facade. It has to be a technical facade. And then my first project was this. I was drawing a project with 100,000 stupas. It was a Buddhist temple, which was the first project I had to design. I knew nothing about Buddhism, but I was working with a team of architect Buddhists. It was fantastic. It totally changed my life. Think about Buddhists and how they handle stress. Be in your competition mindset right now. How does a Buddhist do that? They just relax. They just fix it. They talk in a totally different tone of voice. And even though I was drawing 100,000 stupas in the old CAD programs, which was insane to do facades and work on this project. But I learned so much from it. And another project I just want to show is this one, which is the Caron Project, which is also projected into this way of recycling materials. And this project is the pool goes from the bedroom through the facade outside where you can look at downtown LA. And it's actually the back of a truck that was cut up because the owner of this is an entrepreneur who would gather all his old trucks, and then this was redesigned as a pool. Not a word on sustainability or CO2, just the concept that this was the way it had to be. And it's a pleasure to see this project because it has so many details. It's all waste materials everywhere, and it creates this kind of deconstructivistic architecture that it was so known for. So I worked really, really hard. I wanted to show that I was good as well. And so Rotondo sent me to Miracle Manor because I couldn't afford being in Los Angeles. So I had to work after the office. I worked on different sites to build, to have enough money. So he offered me to go to his Miracle Manor, which was an old motel that he converted into kind of this retreat. So I was working on the roofs, putting out roof tiles together with Mexicans, and fainted often because it was so warm to work there. And they thought that I was a super prima donna because I was an architect, but really it was so hot. And I really loved this place because it was a place where you were not allowed to have cell phones, newspapers, TV, any connection to the outer world. It was a modern monastery. And this way of disconnecting to the world around you and just being in this really small place and finding yourself was fantastic. A lot of people came there just to do that. And I was there for 2 weeks, or something, yeah, 2 weeks. And the last day, I was allowed to do a dinner for Michael Rotondo and his wife, April, that has done a lot of graphic stuff for the Olympics in '84, a very famous graphic designer. And I wanted to show my gratitude and do this dinner. And in Miracle Manor, there was this fantastic Italian kitchen, and I made food for 15 people. I love to do food. That's where you meet and see people. I spent time the whole day cooking, preparing, and the dinner was a success. And afterwards in the kitchen, Rotondo came in to me, and he said, "What is your biggest fear?" And I said, "My biggest fear is not to be what I'm meant to be." And then he smiled a little bit, and then he said, "So what is your greatest dream?" And I said, "To go to Sarch, because I couldn't afford it ever in my life." And he said, "Consider this a scholarship." And then I started. So for me, that was really, really a big thing. And then I started, and I was overwhelmed by this way of talking about architecture in Sarch. It was, again, a new theoretical, deeply conceptual and abstract language of architecture created a totally different new syntax that I had to understand. I had studios with Wes Jones, Neil Denario, Lebes Woods, and Tom Main, and the most humble architect of them all, Perry Culber. Perry Culber did these drawings. He worked for Robert Venturi as a drawer, and he was so humble that he came in with his drawings in a kind of waste bag. So nobody would see that he would bring in these fantastic drawings. He would lay them out, and to see his frustration when we as students didn't succeed on making these types of drawings. He was literally crying because the work was so horrible. And he wasn't angry. He was terrified over his own ability not to teach us what to do right. They were so engaged in this, so it was wonderful. And another thing was this project that Lebes Woods came to do a workshop with us. And for me, Sarch is freedom. Free to build, as Michelangelo said, the freedom to create. And here, all the students got 10 spikes, 3.5 meters long steel rods, and a drill bit. And he said, "Just don't get hurt." And I was like, are we allowed to drill in everything? And we were. And creating space, and what he also talks about is multiplicity and consumerism in his approach to these parasitic structures that is deeply inspiring to see. He created these spaces together with all the students, and which I thought was really, really wonderful. So a lot of my projects became very political, and this project I did with Mads Møller, that I also worked with in the beginning, one of the most talented designers in Denmark, in my opinion. And we had to tackle global problematic situations. And this is the thesis that we did. It's an Arctic research station in the Antarctic, hostile, inaccessible, uninhabitable space, where you have 6 months of darkness, 6 months of light. And you have flying projectiles of ice with 300 kilometers an hour, and you have ice cores telling you about the past and the future. And for me, understanding this, talking with all these Antarctic scientists, was an opening for me, because I started to understand that there was a correlation between the atmosphere, all the ice that was stacked over thousands of years. And this became, for me, a big, big change in how I thought about sustainability, because all the Arctic researchers knew about the consequences of our actions. This is way back, and still they didn't change their behavior at all. They flew a lot, they had cars, they were using a lot of resources. And why was this? Because there wasn't any alternative. No alternative to all of these things. And I thought I needed to change that. So I started reading and understanding what was out there. And among many books, there was Ecotopia by Ernst Kallenbach, Operating Manual for Spaceship Earth by Buckminster Fuller, and not least Inventing Nature by Johann von Humboldt, which has done these wonderful drawings, where we start to understand how ecosystems are put together. I also went to see this exhibition, which basically pushed me a lot further, because Rem Koolhaas did this exhibition called Elements for the Biennale in 2014, where he exemplified that all the elements that we design with, windows, doors, floors, structural, everything, has gone from something we controlled as architects to something that manufacturers are delivering for us. Basically, we've become catalog architects, not in control anymore. And that control was something that I wanted to come back to, because in reality, we were looking into something totally new. We had to reinvent all materials, because even though we are talking about sustainability, there really isn't any sustainable materials, or is there? So for me, the journey started by having to reinvent all these materials, create an alternative, and show that you could actually come up with an alternative, sustainable foundation, construction, insulation, facade material, interior walls, facades, elevators, installations, and so on, which I've done in my projects. So for me, my architectural academic education was rooted in modernism, and you can say the mantra, and Kent was also talking about that form follows function. But can't we kill modernism? Isn't it over? Please. It's time to see it differently. For me, form follows availability. It's the availability of the existing building that we have to respect and use no matter what it is. It's the respect and availability of the material that's already been produced, and you can't change it. It has a form and you have to use it. And it's the respect for the materials that you can convert, upcycle, recycle, create new products that is so super important. And for me, that has been the lecture of this journey, that since my childhood, this is the way that I've been looking at these things. And I think the learning for me in this particular week has been that I have to consider, and we should all, when is enough enough? Thank you.
Thank you a lot.
You're welcome.
I can imagine the week was very... Any comment that you wanted to... This is the last slide that you had.
Yeah, you know, I didn't want to go there because then I would get too emotional, but I have two girls, actually 3, but I'm married to one of them. This is not my wife, but this is the oldest teenager, and of course that plays a big role when you get kids. You know, you start doing too silly things, and you start to think about what you're leaving to them, and there we really have a challenge. All of us, we really have to get our act together and create opportunities and positive lights out there for them to reach for and act accordingly.
Have many questions?
Oh,
difficult. It's going to be only 4 minutes. Wolf, I wonder if you also wanted to stop working at 40, 45? What did your parents say?
45, yeah. I'm way past that post. I'm 47, so I didn't do as well as my dad either.
Enough is enough?
Enough is enough? Yeah, enough is enough. No, I'm serious. I'm thinking about, I'm sorry, a lot of my people from the office is there, but we have to talk about that. No, I think it's always been about becoming larger or doing bigger projects, being more people. And architects, especially now here in Denmark, are saying we shouldn't build, which is an odd paradigm or an odd thing to say when nobody is firing anyone. Everyone is like growing and drawing and doing more and more. But it's really it's a super important thing, because what is it that we need to do? You know, how far do we have to go? I mean, I remember my youth as being fantastic. And it's so far from what people expect of a decent life to be. So I think there is if we should reach these targets on saving CO2 and the challenge we have in the climate situation right now, both on biodiversity, water, health, and all the topics for holistic sustainability, we have maybe only one tool, which is somehow to understand when we have enough. And then find a way to deal with the things that we talk about with circular materials and wood and organic materials, of course, to solve architecture, but we need to limit it.
One question that I had for you regarding sustainability is that I wonder sometimes if we all architects understand the importance of sustainability, why do you think not all architects are practicing it?
Oh, that's a terrible good question. Because it's easier to talk about it than actually walk the walk. You have to be extremely consequent. I've had many years with no projects at all. You want to build in a certain way where things doesn't exist. That's why I had to invent most of the materials myself in the beginning. I invested all my money that I had, which wasn't a lot, but in strange materials that I developed so I could build with them. And that's going that extra mile. And I'm not saying that architects doesn't walk the extra mile, but we are too afraid to change the essence and the DNA of what we are so we can become real sustainable in the way we do our work. And that needs to change. I mean,
that was not such a huge topic when you were at Sarch in LA. You had to kind of grow in the topic. Maybe it's the resistance to change of general in society, but maybe architects.
No, you're totally right. I think, doing sustainable architecture is really easy if you have the components. But we don't have the components, and they are not scaled. And immediately our discussion here goes from architecture to politics. And architecture has become politics. And I think we forget that we have the nuclear bomb of sustainable weapon as architects, because we can design and transform cities and buildings. And that power hasn't been freed yet. A lot of stuff is happening. So there's really an energy now. But taking it to that part where we are willing to push politics and change paradigm shifts of how we build, we are not quite there yet.
There are I have a lot of questions, actually. At some point, you said, or you mentioned in an interview that you, in the beginnings of your career, you stopped. You kind of because you were not able to communicate the value of what you were proposing.
Yeah.
What helped you to be able to do so at some point? You were frustrated.
Yeah, I did a project in Norway. I'm sorry, but it has nothing to do with Norway. In reality, it could have been everywhere. But the thing was in Norway that I had all the resources to do a great sustainability project. There was the money, there was the site, there was the right form. Everything was set up to success. And when the project was finished, there was no sustainability in it. And I was so frustrated. I was like, what did I do wrong? How could I misguide this project so it ended as a beautiful project, in my opinion? It's brilliant on Aker Brygge, but that wasn't the purpose. The purpose was to show sustainability. And then I decided to stop working because something was wrong. I couldn't tell my clients why they should choose the sustainable direction and not just do what they usually do.
It's actually, that's interesting because related to that, I had also another question regarding sometimes if you feel like some projects that you have done in your that the office is very proud of having done and are tagged as sustainable, that you feel like actually we didn't do enough, or actually it's okay, but just okay because it should have been much more. Do you feel that way with some of projects?
I feel like that with all our projects because I know we could do even more. But I've also learned that if I keep saying that to our clients, we don't get anything built. But I will say we don't have any bread and butter projects. Not one single one. We've never had that. We only have projects where we are going really close to the edge of what's possible with that project. And that's why most of our projects they're laboratories of sustainable architecture, and we fail big time on a lot of the projects. We make mistakes. We thought that this was the right way to go, and it didn't work. But we pushed it that far that we actually realized it. And I think for me, it's been more important that the projects reached levels of sustainability or ideas for circularity that hadn't been touched before, pushing it as far as I could. And then I was okay with not having hundreds of projects. It was more important to see how far we could go with the ones that we had and learn from them.
And last one, how should we distinguish the generally sustainable projects from make-up sustainability in some projects that are maybe tagged and marketed as sustainable, but are like, okay, a little bit sustainable?
Oh, that's a good question, a really good question. I think in Denmark, we actually made a law that you can get a lawsuit if you're greenwashing. And I don't know the English word for this embedsman that is doing this, forbrugerombudsmanden, sorry. But he's really targeting companies. Rockwool has had some really tough kind of lawsuits on that behalf, that you can't just go around saying things are sustainable if they're not. No way. You have to stop it. And there are so many things behind how to define sustainability that is very difficult for us as architects and engineers to really understand, because you are allowed to do so many things that are not sustainable. So I think here law and politics has to help here to say what is sustainable and what is not. And then the last thing on that, I think it's up to us also as architects. Why do we work the way we do? Because we love it. And I think there's a trustworthiness in what we do that we have to understand in sustainability, that we need to push that forward with a trust in doing the right thing and not greenwash or cover it up, but really push it forward.
It's still sometimes like we see it again and again.
Yeah,
that's why the question.
Yeah, I'm super frustrated as well.
Anders, thank you for the talk.
Welcome.
I hope the week was worth it. And we have enjoyed it. So thank you a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you a lot.